Man, you ever sit across from someone and realize halfway through the conversation that the world only knows half the story? That's exactly what it felt like with Jordan Peterson. People see the clips, the debates, the fiery speeches, but they don't see the man who's been scarred by his own battles. I've had hundreds of guests on this podcast, from fighters to philosophers, and I'm telling you, Peterson carries a darkness that most people wouldn't believe if they heard it. It's the kind of truth that makes you uncomfortable because it's too damn real. And once you know it, you can't unhear it. Man, Jordan isn't just this clinical psychologist who breaks down human suffering like a textbook. He's lived it. He's walked into the depths of chaos that he talks about. He's had nights where his mind almost collapsed under the pressure of everything he was carrying. And when you realize that, it flips his entire public persona upside down. People think they know Jordan Peterson, but what I discovered off the mic, in those unfiltered conversations, is that the strongest people often have the deepest scars. And his scars tell a story most people aren't ready to face. When you sit with Jordan, you notice something strange. He doesn't waste a single word. Every pause, every sigh, it's like there's a war going on in his head before the sentence even comes out. And that's because his words don't come from theory alone. They come from raw survival. What a lot of people don't realize is that at the peak of his fame, when his lectures were blowing up on YouTube and his book was topping charts, he was drowning behind the scenes. I'm talking about a man whose health was collapsing, whose family life was under insane stress, and whose mind was being tested by a dependence on medication that nearly ended him. And think about that. This guy is out there telling millions of young men how to stand up straight, how to take responsibility, how to fight chaos. And meanwhile, he's fighting chaos in the most brutal, personal way possible. That's the paradox. It's not hypocrisy, it's humanity. It's what makes him different. Jordan wasn't just teaching, he was bleeding. And I think that's why people connected with him so deeply. Even if they didn't know it, they could feel that pain under the surface. You know what really blew my mind? The way Jordan described how fame hit him. Most people think getting famous is like winning the lottery. You cash in, live big, and never look back. But for him, it was more like being thrown into a cage fight with no training. One day he's teaching in a classroom, doing clinical work, and the next, he's on the world stage with millions of people hanging on his every word. That kind of sudden spotlight, it doesn't just lift you, it crushes you. And he told me straight up that it nearly destroyed his sanity. Imagine thousands of people analyzing every sentence you say, waiting to tear it apart or worship it like gospel. That's a psychological nightmare. And Jordan, he's a guy who cares about precision, about truth. So every misinterpretation, every smear campaign, it weighed on him like a ton of bricks. He wasn't built for celebrity culture. He was built for deep, honest conversations. And yet the world made him a symbol, a lightning rod. That pressure cooker, man, it's one of the darkest secrets about Jordan Peterson. He didn't chase fame. Fame chased him, and it almost broke him in half. What hit me the hardest was when Jordan opened up about his battle with medication. People hear the word, meds, and think it's some minor detail. Like, oh, he was on pills, no big deal. No, man, this was life or death stuff. He was prescribed something that was supposed to help him, but instead, it dragged him down into a nightmare. I'm talking dependency, withdrawal, his body shutting down, his mind spiraling. And here's this brilliant psychologist, someone who understands the mechanics of suffering better than most, and even he couldn't escape it. That's the scary part. He told me about nights where he thought he wasn't going to make it. Nights where he felt like his brain was turning against him. And all the while, the world was still demanding that he show up, that he debate, that he be this unshakable voice of reason. That's brutal. That's like asking a fighter to step into the octagon with 2 broken arms and still win. And yet, somehow, he did it. He pushed through, not because he was invincible, but because he was human, and he knew that millions of people out there needed to see that even broken men can fight back. Here's the thing about Jordan. When you hear him speak, you're not just getting a lecture, you're getting a man wrestling with his own demons in real time. That's why people lean in. That's why it feels heavy. He once told me that the reason his words resonate so much is because they're not polished performances. They're survival notes. It's like he's documenting what it takes to stay alive, mentally and spiritually, while the world tries to chew you up. And dude, when I realized that, I couldn't listen to him the same way anymore. The media, man, they never showed that side. They painted him as this controversial figure, some intellectual gladiator, but never as the guy sitting alone at night, trembling trying to keep it together. That's the dark secret people don't know. He wasn't thriving off the chaos. He was barely surviving it. And that makes him more human, not less. Because think about it, if even Jordan Peterson can break under the weight, what does that say about the rest of us? Maybe the real strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and finding a way to rebuild anyway. One of the craziest things Jordan told me was about the toll it took on his family. People forget he's not just a professor or a speaker. He's a husband, a father. When the world dragged him into the spotlight, his family got pulled into it too. And that's brutal, man, because now every headline, every smear piece, every crazy accusation, it wasn't just about him, it was about the people he loved most. He carried that weight like a man dragging chains behind him. His daughter had to watch the internet tear him apart. His wife had to see him collapse under the stress. And when his health went south, it wasn't just his battle, it became theirs. That's what fame doesn't show you. It's not just the celebrity paying the price, it's the whole family. And when Jordan said he felt guilty for putting them through that storm, that hit me hard. Because it wasn't his choice to be famous. It wasn't his choice to be the symbol people made him into. He just wanted to help people. But the cost ended up being almost everything he had. That's the kind of darkness nobody sees on YouTube clips. And here's something wild Jordan told me straight up, that there were moments he didn't think he'd come back. That's heavy, man. Imagine being at the edge of your career, your health collapsing, your reputation under constant fire, and your body betraying you. He admitted there were nights he thought about giving up completely. And when you hear that, from a guy people see as this unshakable tower of strength, it shakes you. It's easy to sit at home and watch a viral clip and think, oh, this dude has it all figured out. But nobody figures it all out. Not really. Life doesn't care how many degrees you have, how many books you've sold, or how many people follow you online. Pain comes for everybody. And what shocked me most was how open he was about it. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to protect his image. He looked me in the eye and said, I almost didn't make it. That's not a sound bite, that's a confession. And that confession tells you more about Jordan Peterson than any debate ever could. You know what else stood out? The way he described his recovery. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't heroic, it was messy as hell. We're talking rehab, endless medical procedures, traveling across the world just to find a treatment that would keep him alive. And every step, he felt like he was one mistake away from losing it all. People like to imagine recovery as this upward climb. But Jordan's was more like crawling through broken glass. He said there were days he couldn't even think straight. Days where the fog in his brain was so heavy he couldn't remember basic things. But here's the wild part. He kept going. He leaned on his family, his faith, and his stubborn will to not let the darkness win. That's what makes his story insane. Most people would have tapped out. Most people would have said, I'm done. But he clawed his way back. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but enough to keep standing. And when you see him now still speaking, still writing, still connecting, it's not because he's indestructible. It's because he walked through fire and somehow came out on the other side. Burned, scarred, but alive. I remember asking him, why keep going? Why not just step away, disappear, live quietly? And his answer floored me. He said, because if I can survive this, then maybe other people will believe they can survive too. That's heavy, man. That's not about ego. That's not about fame. That's about responsibility. He feels like he owes it to the people who look to him for guidance. Even when he was at his lowest, even when he was hanging by a thread, he was still thinking about others. That's not normal, dude. That's rare. Most people, when they're drowning, they're not reaching out to save anyone else. But Jordan, he's wired different. He told me he thinks of his lectures, his books, his talks, as lifelines. And if even one of those lines keeps someone from going under, then it's worth it. That's a dark truth, but also a powerful one. The man who almost didn't make it himself is now one of the biggest reasons other people don't give up. That flips the whole narrative. He's not just a teacher, he's living proof of survival. But here's where it gets real strange. Jordan's darkness is also his strength. Think about it, the same pain that almost killed him is the reason people trust him. Because he's not speaking from a pedestal, he's speaking from the trenches. That makes a difference. You can feel it in his voice, you can see it in his eyes. This is a guy who knows what it's like to stare into the abyss and still crawl back out. And I think that's why he's so polarizing. People either love him or hate him, but nobody ignores him. You can't, because he's too raw. And raw truth always divides people. That's the secret nobody wants to admit. His power doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being broken in a way that's brutally human. And when he lays that out, even if you disagree with him, you have to respect the fight. Because at the end of the day, Jordan Peterson isn't just talking about chaos and order. He's living it every single day. And that's what makes his story both inspiring and terrifying at the same time. Here's something wild I noticed about Jordan. He doesn't wear his pain like a badge, but it's always there in the background, shaping every word he says. When he talks about responsibility, discipline, or carrying your burden, he's not just spitting theory. He's describing the exact things that kept him alive when his world was collapsing. That's why it cuts so deep. It's not motivational fluff, it's the brutal reality he had to cling to when everything else failed. And honestly, that's why people respond so strongly to him. Deep down, we're all fighting invisible battles, but most of us pretend like we're fine. Jordan doesn't pretend. He'll look you in the eye and tell you straight up that life is suffering. And then he'll show you how he barely made it through his own. That honesty, it's terrifying, but it's also liberating. Because if he can admit to struggling, then maybe it's okay for the rest of us to admit it too. And that's the paradox of his so-called dark secrets. They're not just his, they're universal. He's just one of the few brave enough to drag them into the light for everyone else to see. One thing people misunderstand about Jordan is that he doesn't want to be a hero. He hates that label. When I asked him about it, he laughed, like a tired laugh, and said, "I'm barely keeping my own house in order. How can I be anyone's hero?" That humility, man, it's rare. Because here's a guy who could cash in on his fame, sell out arenas, crank out generic self-help slogans, but he refuses. He doesn't want to be a guru. He doesn't want blind followers. He just wants to tell the truth as best as he can, and even if it costs him, and it has cost him, it cost him his health, his peace of mind, and nearly his life. But the dude doesn't back down. That's the dark irony. He never asked for this platform, yet he carries it heavier than anyone I've ever seen. It's like he's stuck between two worlds. The private man who just wants to heal, and the public figure who feels obligated to keep speaking. That tension is constant. And you can hear it in his voice. Every word sounds like it's pulled out of his bones. That's not performance. That's survival. What really struck me is how Jordan views chaos and order, not just as abstract concepts, but as forces that literally tried to tear him apart. The chaos wasn't some metaphor for him. It was his body shutting down, his mind unraveling, his life spinning out of control. And order. That was the fragile thread he clung to. Routine, family, faith, whatever scraps of stability he could find. That's why his lectures hit so damn hard. He's not telling you to clean your room because it sounds good. He's telling you because when your world is collapsing, something as simple as making your bed can keep you from falling into the abyss. That's the dark secret most critics miss. They think his advice is simplistic, even silly. But for Jordan, those simple things were the anchors that kept him alive. It's not philosophy, it's survival strategy. And when you look at it through that lens, it changes everything. You stop hearing him as a professor and start hearing him as a guy who fought off his own destruction with the smallest weapons he had. That's what makes his story so powerful, because if small acts saved him, maybe they can save us too. I've had fighters on this show, Navy SEALs, extreme athletes, you name it. And they all talk about resilience, pushing past pain, going further than your body says you can. But Jordan's fight was different. His arena wasn't a ring or a battlefield, it was his own mind. And honestly, that's the scariest arena of all. Because you can't tap out, you can't run away. You wake up in that cage every single day. He told me once that the hardest part wasn't the physical suffering, it was the hopelessness. The thought that maybe it would never get better. That's the kind of darkness that eats people alive. But Jordan, he faced it. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but relentlessly. And I think that's what people really connect with. He's not a superhero. He's not untouchable. He's a guy who went through hell and didn't let it define him completely. That's strength on a whole other level. Because courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about being terrified and walking forward anyway. And Jordan's life is living proof of that. It's messy, it's painful, but it's real. And realness is what people crave most. So here's the truth. When I say Jordan Peterson has dark secrets, I don't mean scandals or hidden agendas. I mean the kind of truths that most people bury because they're too painful to admit. The nights of despair, the breakdowns, the crushing weight of fame, the dependency on meds, the near-death battles with his own mind. That's the stuff the world doesn't see. And yet, that's also what makes him who he is. Because let's be honest, if Jordan Peterson was just another smooth, talking professor, nobody would care. What makes him resonate globally is that he's broken and still standing. He's scarred and still speaking. And when he says you can endure suffering, he's not theorizing, he's testifying. That's powerful. That's why people keep listening. Even when they disagree with him, they feel the raw truth behind his words. And maybe that's the real secret. Not that he's hiding darkness, but that he lives with it in the open. And by doing that, he gives everyone else permission to face their own. That's not just shocking, it's inspiring as hell. Because if Jordan can survive his storm, maybe we can survive ours too.